There was this one thing I looked forward to in grade school. I couldn't wait to go to school on the days we were allowed to play Oregon Trail, a simple game about leading a group of pioneers across the United States. On the way, we had to forage, hunt, and fish for food, and we had to deal with the many dangers of pre modern life. Another popular game was Math Blaster, where we had to use arithmetic to outwit space hazards. At some point, we stopped playing these games at school, maybe because we outgrew them, but it brings about the idea, what if we never stopped? In fact, what if all we ever did in school was play video games? Not all games are looked down upon. Traditionally, games like chess have been supported by most adults. There is no stigma against a child becoming a chess prodigy. Other games, particularly puzzle games, often are touted for improving memory, problem solving, and cognitive development. And although attitudes are shifting, we typically don't carry the same associations for the typical video games. This is strange if we think about it. We may add on layers of graphics, character models, and complex skill sequences, but the problem solving and strategy are still present. Most games use engaging, iterative approaches. That is, repetition of moves, repeated trials, and experimentation. And through this, individual neurons in the brain respond to improvement, and from these principles, we are able to develop the complex networks in our brain. As we learn more, our ability to process information improves, and we are able to tackle increasingly difficult cognitive tasks. Some games are inherently educational, and we need no stretch to see why. Take Polybridge. Players use physics and engineering principles to build a bridge. Players must design and test models and are slowly eased into the laws of physics. In Kerbal Space Program, players must design a functional rocket, akin to the bottle rocket experiments you might have done in school, except at a much more intricate level. In Portal, though the laws of physics are modified, users must use their wits to solve challenging puzzles, often in novel ways. Rhythm games, among others, improve hand-eye coordination, peripheral vision, and reaction time. RTSs and MOBAs improve cognitive flexibility, which is the ability to rapidly switch between multiple information sources, an ability, let's just say, lacking in those who don't typically play these sorts of games. There are many cooperative games like Don't Starve Together, and all of these improve communication skills and teamwork, and not the type of teamwork you typically see in school, where group work is just a synonym for divide and conquer. Generally, most games improve all sorts of things, from concentration to problem solving to overall cognitive ability. And though some games may seem at first glance to serve no practical purpose, there are oftentimes complex and overlapping systems which promote limitless creativity. And probably of greatest importance, games naturally encourage competition and community, properties important in any educational environment. Imagine we swapped out compartmentalized subjects like history, math, and science. Instead, we take a class like this, civilization and culture. Though the rules and expectations may be the same, the content would look much different. In this class, we explore ancient Greek civilization through the Ubisoft game Discovery Tour, which uses many assets from the well-known Assassin's Creed franchise. We get to explore picturesque landscapes, learning from the Greek citizens themselves. We walk within the cities we wish to learn about. In our second module, we use Civilization 6 to teach us about the many aspects that lead to the creation of a flourishing city. We explore how religion, culture, military, technology, and government all influence the development of a civilization that can stand the test of time. In another class, we explore system analysis and logistics using games like Oxygen Not Included. We must micromanage overlapping systems such as electricity, plumbing, temperature, and oxygen. Small modifications can often trigger a cascade of events, which results in the inevitable end of your space colony. To succeed, players must carefully evaluate evidence and construct explanations for the problems they may encounter. As they play, players are constantly designing comprehensive engineering solutions. In Module 2, we use Rise of Industry to explore logistic networks. To produce high-tier goods, we must develop complex supply chains. Changes often need to be made, such as adjustment of productivity or dealing with changes in supply and demand, all of which affect changes upstream and downstream that need to be dealt with. In Anno 1800, we do the previous and much more. We must learn to manage trade networks between islands and set up complex production chains. In this game, we explore how trading may have occurred during the colonization period, in which, to meet the demands of the imperialists, we must colonize and exploit lands which have access to resources not found in the Old World. Anyone who has stepped inside the average US high school understands its shortcomings. Students are chronically stressed, discouraged, and bored. And the education system is taking too long to adapt to this generation, and its mechanism of change is primitive. Online education has further exposed the flaws that were always lurking below. School districts are old-fashioned, and because of No Child Left Behind, most institutions have, by and large, given up the task of deep education for the short-term goals of test passing and improving graduation rates. Sure, some schools are embracing technology like Kahoot and Quizlet, but these changes do nothing to address systemic issues. Most education software ends up adding only a superficial layer, but ultimately are the same old drill and practice. They're sugar-coated digital flashcards, a way to disguise memorization, and detract from genuine games that promote greater learning. Adding flashy sounds and animations after someone gets a question right is only a quick fix, a band-aid of sorts, but ultimately the same old, same old. The discussions often go in circles. Educators talk about the problems of standardized testing. They talk about the amount of homework. The blame shifts from the parents to the teachers, to the administrators, to the students, to society. And everyone is looking for a scapegoat for the problems caused by deeper issues. Video games may help alleviate many of the complex issues surrounding education. They allow for experiential learning, or learning through experience. Games bring massive amounts of content, they build on prior knowledge, strengthen grit, and deliver personalized experiences. There are many things that can result in inherent differences in learning ability. Things like poverty, trauma, bad parenting, poor nutrition, disability, sleep deprivation, lousy study skills. But games are naturally scaffolded, which means they support all types of individuals regardless of their background. And for some, games offer an essential escape when life gets all too stressful. Differentiation, a phrase educators are familiar with, is not an issue in video games. Games are naturally engaging and do not require a set of precursor skills or abilities. Games are also patient, waiting for you to complete each task, or allowing you to spend as much time if that's what you desire. With VR, educators can also take advantage of multiple learning modalities, such as kinesthetic, auditory, and visual. Though there are criticisms of learning modalities, it doesn't take an expert to realize the benefits of simulated experiences versus scripted instruction. Learning happens when an individual is invested in something, and compartmentalized homework or labs don't do much to encourage long-term engagement. But games do a very good job of that. They put you into a role that you would never be able to fill in the classroom. With games, there is no need for assessment. The game is the assessment. Imagine needing to test someone after they beat a difficult level in Mario. And failure in games is generally much more tolerated than failure in a test, which is as it should be. Students should be given a chance to fail and derive motivation and pleasure for when they inevitably succeed. There are limitless things that games can teach, such as leadership abilities from leading a tribe or alliance, to basic principles of markets, such as supply and demand. Intricate concepts like gambler's fallacy and other probability properties can be easily introduced in games without the damaging real-world repercussions. What about practical use of spreadsheets or practice writing guides, both of which I learned from a game most known for its action combat? None of these skills are listed anywhere in the game manuals, but are provided through authentic experiences that cannot be emulated in any classroom setting. There are, as with all things, limitations of learning. Some aspects of school may not be replicated as easily in a game setting, such as the accumulation of crystallized intelligence. Think of Jeopardy knowledge. And though this may be true, it is probably time society reevaluates the type of education we should be fostering. Will we really need to know discrete pieces of information, such as the presidents of the United States or what the aortic valve is responsible for? With advances in AI, there will probably soon be a device that lets you just think of a question and obtain the answer instantly. We will have a calculator in our pocket, and we're probably going to get a few more. And a computer will also be able to store significantly more bytes of information and of greater accuracy than any human brain. But what AI struggles with are more complex computations, such as multi-level tasks and multivariate problem solving. They are difficult to design and probably won't be able to replace all of the occupations, at least anytime soon. Regardless, we should be teaching concepts today that a robot cannot replicate tomorrow. But if you really wish to continue with traditional trivia, there are always games which provide greater engagement than any textbook.
It's got to be adventure. It's got to be adventure.
Educators and parents will argue that students will need to develop discipline and a good work ethic. But what they don't understand is that in this generation, the world is driven by constant stimulation. And it's also inviting and easy to access that things like memorizing the quadratic formula or reading Catcher in the Rye sound like conspiracies made by grown-ups. These students know of an alternate reality, one that is so much more immersive and relevant than anything encountered at school. And to shortchange them is wrong. There are, of course, serious issues with gaming. To implement games that are truly authentic, and in this case educational by nature, we must avoid common practices by gaming companies. These include the need to retain players through addictive elements like daily quests or login bonuses. Monetization would need to be overhauled. Companies cannot be incentivized to profit from the user. Instead, the government and school systems will need to fund these programs themselves, as they do with similar educational tech subscriptions. This way, companies will have little motivation to introduce practices that diminish gameplay and instead focus on building a polished, enjoyable experience. Instead, we let natural curiosity and exploration be the addictive element. And in the great games that once were, oftentimes delayed gratification is the norm. Another problem is diminishing returns. At some point, no matter the game, the amount of knowledge and skills gained will be limited. Once a certain mastery level is reached, it will be important to transition. Students should be encouraged to play a variety of games for a diversified learning experience. And this shouldn't be so hard, since many great games are also just meant to be played once and lack any of the typical psychologically addictive elements. And there will always be ways to make sure that there's no replayability at all. All of this should open up pathways for companies, some of which have been taken over by their marketing departments. I'm sure many game developers went into this business not to make money, but instead to tell imaginative stories and deliver amazing experiences. Perhaps we can tackle multiple issues at once, reforming the gaming companies alongside the education system while benefiting both. Companies that used to craft masterpieces but were swayed by other incentives may have an economically viable option. And children can grow up playing games that support their development rather than being hooked by predatory systems. Imagine a world in which students can't wait to go to school. Students are 100% engaged and can't get enough of it. They attempt new challenges each day. The class wonders how 7 hours could flow by so quickly. At home, students can't wait to do their homework, and they also have the option of completing it with friends and family. In this world, game companies craft amazing experiences, supporting the intellectual development and creativity of the next generation. And teachers like myself will be free to do what we signed up for, teaching motivated and curious students, doing our best to encourage their growth and development. When did we resort to standardized tests, scripted instruction, and rote memorization? Most other mammals in the animal kingdom learn by play and exploration. Our natural instinct is to play, and our brains have evolved to learn in this state. When we're hungry, we eat. When we're thirsty, we drink. And when we're bored, it's because we need to play. Why are we still teaching as if our students will work in a factory after graduation? Every other field has changed so much. Though there are nuanced and varied reasons we keep bouncing back to our archaic roots, we should probably start to consider the possibilities. What might or what should education look like a century from now? Are we effective educators, or are we just holding on to the familiar? Perhaps it's time to revamp this current education system. We've got all the required resources, but we will need to shift our way of thinking.